Hello and welcome to another episode of Cake Bite Presents The Making of Kaleidoscope. I'm writer, director, producer Paige Feldman. And this week, as every week, I'm taking you inside my process of making my debut feature film. We're going from idea to premiere in real time. So I am still hard at work revising my massive first draft for Kaleidoscope. The draft is 263 pages, and I am currently on page 178 or so, which means that I only have 85 pages to go, which is like a normal short movie to revise. And it also means that I've already revised like 2 other movies. Until I have more to report on my revision for Kaleidoscope, I want to talk about movies. So I have 3 big comp titles, and comp is short for comparison, or comparative, which means titles that I can give to an executive or a potential financier to give them an idea of what Kaleidoscope is going to feel like. So my 3 big comp titles are Being John Malkovich, Sliding Doors, a Gwyneth Paltrow classic, and obviously Palm Springs, a fantastic time loop romantic comedy that came out in 2020. But those aren't the only time loop or time portal movies that have helped inspire and influence Kaleidoscope. Today, I want to tell you about 4 of them that are underappreciated and underviewed, but are some of my personal favorites. So let's roll those titles, and I'll tell you about 4 time-bending movies that you've probably never seen. Alright, here we go. 4 time loop, time bending, time portal movies that you've probably never seen. This first one, you might not have seen, but you've probably heard of it. It's a Netflix original film and the only romantic comedy of the bunch. When We First Met stars Adam Devine and Alexandra Daddario. It's about Adam Devine, whose best friend, played by Alexandra Daddario, is about to get married. And he is just in love with her. And the night of the party of her engagement announcement, he has some major regrets about never telling her his true feelings. There's a magic photo booth involved, and he goes back in time to the night they first met, and he has time after time after time to try to make things right and get the girl. Now, when I first heard about this premise, I thought, ugh, sexist and predictable, and I hate it. But you should watch it because it's funny and surprising, and it has a lot of heart. The premise makes you believe that Adam Devine is going to try to manipulate Alexandra Daddario's character into falling in love with him, but that's not it. Because the story isn't really about their romance, it's about personal growth for Adam Devine's character. And that sense of personal growth, the focus on how the time loop helps an individual gain perspective on their life, is something that I am taking away from When We First Met and using in Kaleidoscope. Movie number 2. This is also a Netflix original, but I don't know if you might have heard of it because I don't think it was marketed very well when it came out. It's called ARQ, A-R-Q, and remember that movie starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, the time loop movie called Edge of Tomorrow, which is like one of the worst titles ever. That movie could have had such a good title. It could have been called Live, Die, Repeat, or the graphic novel it's based on was All You Need Is Kill, which is an amazing title. Instead, it's Edge of Tomorrow, which I had to Google that before I started making this video because I can never remember the title, even though the movie is one of my favorites. Anyway, ARQ on Netflix is like if Edge of Tomorrow was set inside one person's home. It is a sci-fi action-y thriller that involves a time loop. It's just so good and so fun. The script for ARQ was one that came across my desk when I was a development executive. The story was so big and grand in scale, even though the entire thing takes place in one guy's house. It was really a masterpiece of storytelling, masterpiece of low budget storytelling especially. I tried to acquire it for my independent sales company I was working for, but Netflix got there first, obviously. So, I mean, who can compete with Netflix? Well, that's a weird question to ask right now since their stock's tanking, but still a relevant question. Anyway, Arc is a really tight and exciting sci-fi thriller. My only criticism of it is that the story stays indoors a lot. I said it takes place inside one guy's house the whole time, and 95% of the time, the movie's inside, and inside the same sets. So when I was reading the script, the story felt like it had this epic breadth. But then when I finally saw the film, I think it premiered in Toronto, it was a little bit cramped feeling. The necessity of having scenes indoors, of having scenes in different locations, of giving your story world some room to breathe and feel expansive. That's something I hadn't really considered about making independent films, making low budget films, until I saw how Arc's single location worked against it in a way. So that is the lesson that I'm taking from Arc as I write Kaleidoscope, which is even though 75% of the action takes place in one house, I've elected for that house to be a very large house, and I've made sure to have plenty of scenes on the patio, and also take my characters out into the world a few times. I'm gonna have a scene on the beach, a scene hiking on a trail, things that show off Los Angeles and make you feel like these characters are living in a world as opposed to living in a micro-budget film that cannot contain anything more than the sets that we have. Third movie is one called The Final Girls. Now, there's a movie that came out around the same time called Final Girl, and another one called Final Girls. It's neither of those. This one is The Final Girls. You need to include the, include the S, and also to help you know you're watching the right one. It stars Tessa Farmiga, Malin Eckerman, who's one of my favorite comedic actresses, Nina Dobrev, Thomas Middleditch, and again, we have Adam Devine in another time loop movie. Except this one is not a romantic comedy. It is a slasher time loop film. Now, even though I love writing romantic comedies, I wish I could write horror. Horror is one of my favorite genres. The Nightmare on Elm Street is one of my favorite movies, and I actually wrote my undergrad dissertation at USC on the history of the slasher film. Plus, when I was a development exec, I developed a ton of horror and not so much slasher, but a ton of horror. And that mood analysis tool that I developed was to ensure that horror filmmakers had the right pace for their films. So horror is just my happy place. I love it. And this movie is so much fun. It is a throwback to 80s slasher films, even though it was made in 2015. It is about Tessa Farmiga's character. She's a teenager, the teenage daughter of a former Scream Queen, Malin Eckerman. In one of the first scenes, Malin Eckerman, her character, dies in a car accident. And then on the anniversary of her death, Tessa Farmiga and her friends stumble in to Camp Bloodbath, which is the movie that her mom was famous for being in. Every 91 minutes, which was the runtime of the movie resets. And her friends are trying to figure out how to get out of this repeating horror hell, because there's obviously a killer on the loose. It's like Scream in that it's a meta slasher movie. The characters, the Tessa Farmiga and her friends, are aware of the conventions of horror movies and aware that they're in one. But there is an unexpected emotional twist to this film because it's a way for Tessa Farmiga's character to see her mom one last time, because her mom, as the character in the film, is stuck with her in this loop. That's one of the things that I'm taking away from The Final Girls as I write Kaleidoscope. The idea that a time loop can be a safe space to overcome trauma and emotional issues. Another thing I love about this movie is the time loop mechanism, where the time loop resets after a certain amount of time has passed within movie land. In The Final Girls, it's 91 minutes, which is the runtime of the movie. After that, the loop resets. In Kaleidoscope, it is the time, 11:37 on the clock, when Jonah and Devin get in a car accident, because that car accident was sort of the beginning of the deterioration of both Jonah and Lee's life. So whether or not the car accident happens at 11:37 p.m., the loop is over. Well, I mean, like, Lee and Jonah both wake up, go about their lives, and then when they go back to sleep, the loop has reset. Fourth And finally is my favorite of these time loop, time portal, time bending movies that you've never seen. This one is the one that is not strictly a time loop, so that's why I've been saying all of these different words that include it, because I want to talk about it. It's fantastic. It is called Coherence. It is a mind-bending, as well as time-bending, sci-fi thriller made on a shoestring budget. I first saw it when I was an exec and accidentally got invited to a screening because the US sales agent accidentally put my name on a list of US distributor acquisitions execs I acquired for international rights. But it was not a wasted afternoon at all because I got to spend it seeing such an amazing and clever film. So I don't want to spoil too much of what it's about because so much of the fun of this movie is the discovery. But I'll give you the setup, which is that a group of friends meet up to have a comet party. There's a comet that's coming that night and everyone's, having a party, there's personal drama, the makings of sort of like a mumblecore thriller. And then there's a power outage. And after the power outage happens, all hell breaks loose. All confusion breaks loose. And that's when the time-bending, time loop portal situation starts to take place. It is a completely wild ride, and it highlights the power that good dialogue, interesting characters, and an audience's imagination has to make a small story feel bigger. It'd be really interesting to watch it back to back with Arc, potentially. Probably watch Arc first, because they both take place within just a few locations, probably the same number of locations, and yet Coherence, you feel like you are in the middle of a universe, whereas Arc, despite having a bigger premise and larger stakes, feels a lot more compact. And in general, Coherence, it has the lowest budget of these bunch of movies. I think it's definitely under $100,000, and the actors are all friends. And one of these friends, these actors, is Lorraine Scafaria, who is the director of Hustlers, which is that amazing Jennifer Lopez Constance Wu movie about the strippers that Jennifer Lopez should have won an Oscar for that movie. But Lorraine Scafaria is in Coherence as an actor, and just me and my fangirl about independent women directors, super excited to see that. Or really to realize it after the fact because I saw Coherence before Hustlers existed. But so from Coherence, what I'm taking away, besides my desire to make a movie as good as that, and as interesting as that, and exciting as that, is the fact that so much of the interest and excitement is based around the characters themselves, the problems they're facing, their internal conflict, their external conflict, their interpersonal conflict, and the fact that the decisions they have to make are compelling and unique and unexpected. So as I go through this revision and try to figure out how to make this movie work on a low budget, I just need to remember to go to character. Because as long as my characters are strong and they have compelling decisions they have to make and compelling conflicts within them and between them, that's going to be the thing that's going to capture people's hearts and imaginations. So those are 4 time-bending, time loop, time portal movies that you have probably never seen before. If you want to check them out, here is where you can find them as of now. Obviously, Google, especially if this video is showing up in your feed a year or 2 later. But When We First Met and Arc are both on Netflix. They're both Netflix originals, so they should still be there. Coherence is on Hulu right now and is also available to rent on other streaming services. The Final Girls isn't available on a streaming service for free right now, or free with subscription, but it is available to rent on Prime, Vudu, Apple TV Plus, and a bunch of other places, including, I think, YouTube. Check out the movies you haven't seen before, because even if you're not doing research for a time loop film, they are such fun, such good rides, full of heart and humor and excitement. And if there are any obscure time loop movies, or not so obscure ones, that you want to share with me, please leave a recommendation in the comments. I am always down to watch a new movie, especially a time loop movie, because I want to make sure that Kaleidoscope fits in within the canon, but also is wholly original and itself, and research is a good thing. Thank you all so much for watching. I am continuing to rewrite Kaleidoscope, and I'll be back next week to give you an update on my progress and more here, same bat time, same bat channel, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Wednesdays, or whenever you have time to stream.